Mark, Mark in Ontario, California.
Oh, there you go, Mark. You're on.
Yeah, hi. I'm Mark. I'm a devout Christian. Haven't been all my life. I'm born again. I was actually, I led a life of crime and everything else, and I was born again when I was at treatment center. This isn't the point I'm trying to make. I'm not getting into that, but I've heard you say a number of times you've looked at it and you can't find a reason to believe. I just wanted to touch on this a bit. Myself, I found a reason to believe because when I gave my life to Christ, my life changed, and I stopped committing crime, and I stopped doing drugs, and everything just started working out for me. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm simplifying it, and I'm saying, if you don't believe in a God, where did everything come from? Because it's just as ludicrous to believe that the Big Bang just happened and everything just laid out and the universe is just the way it is. I mean, cities don't just pop up out of the ground because two rocks bang together. There's geniuses that plan the construction of buildings. So how much more complicated is the universe?
Crazy. I've been talking for like 10 minutes, so.
Where do you believe everything came from, Mark?
I believe that there's some all-powerful being. Maybe the Big Bang is what he used. I believe there's some all-powerful being that chain reacted to Big Bang, just like when we bring down buildings for precise explosions, that made it happen, and everything is the way it is because of this all-powerful being.
Why do you believe that?
Because I feel his presence within me. Like I said, I used to be a criminal. I used to be a drug user. I used to be all these bad things, and as soon as I let that being into my life, I was able to live a new life.
Well, you do understand that people can change their lives for all manner of reasons, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so some people do change their lives and they attribute it to religion, and some people change their lives and they're not religious, correct?
I'm not saying, yeah, I know that. I know.
I'm just asking. Like I'm just making sure we're on the same page. So you changed your life and you attribute it to religion. So why do you attribute it to religion?
Not so much religion, spirituality.
Okay, why do you attribute it to spirituality?
Because I believe that there's more than what we see. Just like in the ocean, the tip of the iceberg is only what you see on the surface, and there's so much more underneath.
Why do you believe that?
Because it just makes sense to me. It just feels right. It's
so
like,
you feel it's correct, but what do you know why you feel it's correct?
I don't know. It's like one of those things you can't explain. Like you can't tell somebody why you love somebody. You just know in your heart that you do.
But can people be mistaken about the things that they know in their heart? Can a person know in their heart that their spouse is faithful and then find out they've actually been cheating?
Yeah.
Okay, so
like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying some of the things that happen in the name of religion, like 9/11 and things like that. I totally disagree with that, and I think that's totally wrong.
Right. I agree. But I guess what I'm asking is, you said you know this because you feel it in your heart, but we agree that sometimes people feel things in their heart and it's the intuition is not right. So how do you know that what you feel is correct?
Honestly, it's not something that I can explain or put into words. It's like, to quote a famous movie, and I just say to quote it, so I'm not stealing it.
No, I understand.
Like Morpheus says to Neo, I can't explain what the Matrix is to you. It's something you have to experience for yourself.
Right, but I mean, Morpheus didn't just rely on saying you have to have faith in it. He actually demonstrated that the Matrix happened, right? I mean, you know, and unless he had provided that evidence, then he could very well have been just a crazy guy.
Yeah, it's like, would Neo have believed it without the pill?
Yeah, I mean, if Morpheus came up to me right now and and told me actually the Matrix is real and the movie was a documentary, I wouldn't believe him, would you?
No. Okay, the evidence for me was, like I said, I spent numbers of years in and out of jail. And what the turning point for me was, I'd seen numbers of people who I knew were hardened criminals, the toughest, roughest people you'd ever met or ever knew. So it wasn't just reading a book, it was people I knew personally.
So we can agree that
they're like the Christ, they became a totally new person, a totally And
Okay,
that
so we can
is
agree
like-
that when people adopt certain beliefs, then often that changes their lives because they act differently according to those beliefs. But does that mean that the beliefs are true? I mean, if I developed a serious belief in Islam and I stopped being a criminal as a result of that belief, you wouldn't think that Islam is true, would you?
That's a good point. That's a good point. You have a good point. My brother Rick is actually the one that turned me on to the Atheist Experience, and he did warn me that you guys would have some stifling questions and points.
I'm not trying to stifle you. I mean, I just think, you called in and you'd like to convince us that your point of view is right.
Or at least
So
explain it so that, yeah, I mean, you just called in to talk to us about what you believe and why you believe it. And so that's fine. I mean, I understand what you believe and I understand what's driving that belief. I just question whether that is valid. Because I do know that what people feel sometimes is incorrect. It's incorrectly interpreted. Of course, you feel what you feel, but the cause of that feeling sometimes isn't what you think it is. And sometimes, like what I was talking about with infidelity, a person can feel in their heart that my spouse would never cheat on me, my spouse is faithful to me, and they believe that. But then they find out that their spouse has been cheating and having an affair for the last year. And this happens. So feelings can, even though the person felt honestly that their spouse was being faithful, and that was true of them to say that that's how they felt and that they had confidence in that, sometimes that's not really, the confidence is misplaced. Or the reason for the confidence isn't that the interpretation of the event is correct, or the interpretation of the feeling.
Okay. So what are your guys' thoughts and feelings and beliefs on the spiritual side of humanity and being human?
I ask people when they call in to tell me how they define spiritual because I don't know what the word means.
Yeah, you're right. That is a very vague, because I don't mean like religious. I mean like just knowing that there's more to us than just flesh, blood, and bone. Like,
do you know that?
Well, what about the 7 ounces, I think it is?
The
6
what?
Ounces, 7 ounces?
I've you're talking about
read articles
like some number of
people
grams disappear, or the human body loses a certain number of grams when they die, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because actually somebody just wrote to me about this last week, and I actually went up and looked this thing up on Snopes, and apparently, I mean, this is a real experiment that somebody tried like 100 or 200 years ago or so. But people, people who have come in after him and looked at how he did the study and compared it, like done it with proper experimental controls, found out that there were things that he was doing wrong, which accounted for the lost weight. I think that I can't remember exactly what it is, but
Well, but you said you found it on Snopes, right?
Yeah.
So he can look this
Snopes,
up.
look up. I think it's 21 grams, isn't it? I think it's something like that. But I mean, it was something like the bodies that he was studying. There were a small number of them, and they were all stored in cold conditions, which bodies generally are, and they lost moisture that way. And then he compared it to doing a study on dogs under the principle that dogs don't have a soul, but then the dogs weren't stored in the same way as the people. So, I mean, it's interesting that, this sounds very convincing because it's in kind of a scientific framework, but if you're going to make a scientific style argument that there's a soul, then you have to be willing to accept the kind of scientific criticism which is routine.
Well, but I would also add, if this spirit is physical, which it would have to be in order to account for actual measurable weight, then it should be identifiable physically, shouldn't it?
Well, because I'm a born-again Christian, I'm not like an atypical Christian who denies like certain facts. Like, I totally know the world has been in existence for 4 billion years, not just 6,000 years.
Well, no, I guess what I'm trying to, excuse me, what I'm trying to ask is, if a person did lose weight after they died, wouldn't that indicate that whatever was lost was physical? Because physical mass has weight, correct?
Yeah.
So in that case, the person would be describing the soul as a physical thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is that spiritual or is that a physical thing? And if there's a loss of physical mass, shouldn't then, if that's a soul, shouldn't it be physically identifiable while we're alive? Like, shouldn't we be able to physically identify the soul as a part of the body if it has physical mass?
Yeah, that's okay. That's a good strong point.
I guess when we ask what are the reasons you believe, you know, going at it from a scientific point of view is kind of a good thing to do, and it's not because science is something we automatically trust, or you know, science is our religion, like I was saying earlier. You know, that's not the case. It's just that science is kind of an attempt by humans to sort of admit that we are all fallible. And that, like Tracy was saying, the things that we believe, even if we really, really believe them, aren't always true. And so, you know, we ask ourselves the question, I know I'm capable of error, so how would I go about finding out for sure, coming up with some kind of verification? And the idea of going after, you know, of measuring a soul, or even thinking of a test to measure a soul, is a good start. But I mean, you have to follow all the principles that make sure that your test is really objective and not just steering you toward what you want to think is true. You see what I'm saying?
And you'd also have to have a pretty good definition for a soul to know what it was exactly that you were looking for.
Yeah, true. Okay. Okay, just one more thing, because we're talking about scientists and stuff here. Like, I just wanted to mention this too. C.S. Lewis, I'm sure you know who that is, right?
Sure.
Yes.
He set out. He was a scientific mind, a great scientific mind from his time. He
wasn't a scientist,
to disprove the existence of God, and in his trek to disprove the existence of God, he ended up becoming one of Christianity's greatest supporters.
How? What was
phenomenon?
the evidence? What was the evidence that changed his mind? I know that C.S. Lewis, I really enjoy his fiction. The things he considers nonfiction, not so much. But if he was this great scientific mind, then what was the evidence, as far as you know, that made him a Christian?
Well, from what I understand, see, the Alpha series, I don't know if you know anything, if you know about the Alpha series or not, Nicky Gumbel, the Alpha series, he quotes C.S. Lewis a lot. From what I understand, in his trek to disprove God, he found that there is a vague emptiness and that there is no purpose or meaning to our existence without the existence of God.
So
okay, wait a minute.
Wait
a minute.
What?
Do you know that there are many, many Buddhists that don't believe in God?
No.
Okay, Buddhism does not rely on belief in a God. There is no God in Buddhism. And I'm pretty sure they have a very directed purpose and meaning to what they do. I mean, they have a specific philosophy that guides their life, but they don't have a God. So I don't agree that a person requires a God in order to have meaning and purpose. I mean, Buddhists are one example. I think anyone can do it, but they're a good example of a more structured group with a more defined belief system that doesn't incorporate a God. And humanists would be another kind of conglomerated group that has sort of like a directive to do what is best for, you know, humanity and I guess like the planet in general and things like that. So there are people who have purposes that are direct purposes for helping the planet or helping people or doing the right thing while they're alive, and not so focused, I guess, on the idea of God or appeasing a God. You also have deists who believe in a God but think that that God is not interacting with people at all and has no concern for us whatsoever. And those people believe in a God, but that God has nothing to do with any sort of meaning in their lives or directing their lives in any way.
Okay, sure.
I really I appreciate the honest attitude in your call. I just want to tell you that.
And I mean, I think maybe you ought to, think about it a little more and maybe call back another week. Would that be okay with you?
Like I said, I'm open-minded. Like that was part of how I changed my life too. I had to become open-minded, open to new concepts and ideas and ways of thinking. So.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks. You've given me a lot to think about.
Well, thank you for your call.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you call back.
Okay.
Talk to you later.